March 16, 2026. War, Markets, and the Fragile Rules-Based Order. Why the US, Israel, Iran escalation matters beyond the Middle East. The latest escalation involving Israel, the United States, and Iran can no longer be viewed as a contained regional confrontation. It has evolved into a broader geopolitical, legal, military, and financial stress event with implications for the Muslim world, global capital movements, energy security, maritime trade corridors, and the credibility of the post-1945 international order. Available reporting indicates that the current phase of hostilities began on February 28, 2026, when coordinated US-Israeli strikes targeted Iranian facilities, followed by Iranian retaliation through missile and drone attacks directed at Israel and Gulf-linked locations. The conflict has since contributed to heightened instability in Lebanon, Iraq, and the wider Gulf theater. Verified international reporting suggests that the war has now entered its third week, with civilian casualties rising and missile exchanges continuing, raising growing concern that escalation may be moving faster than diplomatic containment. The central actors in this confrontation are easily identified, yet their strategic motivations differ significantly. Israel and the United States appear focused on weakening Iranian military capabilities and increasing pressure on Tehran's regional posture. Iran, by contrast, is responding through calibrated retaliation and strategic signaling designed to raise the cost of intervention, while demonstrating that any escalation will not remain geographically contained. Gulf states, meanwhile, seek to shield their territory and critical energy infrastructure from spillover. Groups aligned with Iran, including Hezbollah and Hamas, are navigating intense pressure while adjusting their responses. Hamas, for example, has urged Iran not to target neighboring countries, even while acknowledging Iran's claimed right to self-defense. Such dynamics illustrate that the wider Muslim world is far from politically uniform. Solidarity with Palestine or criticism of Israeli military actions does not necessarily translate into support for uncontrolled regional escalation. The legal dimension of the crisis exposes deeper structural tensions within the international system. The United Nations Charter clearly prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of states under Article 2.4, while Article 51 preserves the inherent right of self-defense when an armed attack occurs. The UN Secretary-General condemned the escalation at the outset of hostilities, and humanitarian organizations, including the International Committee of the Red Cross, have warned that expanding military operations are placing civilians at grave risk across the region. At the same time, legal scholars increasingly argue that the scale and scope of current operations may extend beyond what Article 51 permits under international law. Reports of strikes affecting civilian areas, including schools, have intensified scrutiny. The broader challenge is evident when powerful states stretch interpretations of self-defense and other actors respond with selective silence shaped by geopolitical convenience. International law begins to resemble a retrospective justification rather than a binding restraint on the use of force. This erosion of legal discipline explains why earlier criticisms of US and Israeli military interventions remain relevant today. The 2003 Iraq War remains widely cited in legal scholarship as one of the most contested uses of force in modern international relations. Academic research, including the Costs of War project at Brown University, has documented the immense human and financial toll associated with post-9/11 military campaigns. The present confrontation differs in context but echoes familiar patterns: expansive security claims, reliance on military coercion, heightened civilian risks, and delayed legal accountability. Recent scholarly work examining Israeli military doctrine has likewise intensified debate around civilian harm, targeting practices, and the shifting of battlefield risk toward densely populated urban areas. From an economic perspective, the most immediate consequence lies not only in oil prices, but in the repricing of systemic geopolitical risk. The IMF's January 2026 outlook projected global growth at approximately 3.3% for the year, but that projection preceded the full escalation of Gulf tensions. Since hostilities intensified, financial markets have responded with sharp movements across oil, gas, gold, the US dollar, sovereign bond yields, and volatility indicators. Such patterns reflect a familiar dynamic during wartime conditions. Capital shifts toward liquidity, reserve currencies, safe haven assets, defense-related sectors, and economies perceived as less exposed to physical supply disruptions. The issue is not widespread financial panic, but rather the emergence of a higher geopolitical risk premium embedded in global markets. Energy flows and maritime trade routes remain the primary transmission channels linking this conflict to the broader world economy. The Strait of Hormuz alone carries roughly a quarter of global seaborne oil trade, as well as major shipments of liquefied natural gas and fertilizers. Reports indicate that the current conflict has disrupted shipping movements through the corridor, constraining crude availability for some Southeast Asian refiners. The International Energy Agency has revised its demand outlook and acknowledged short-term disruptions, even while maintaining expectations that global supply may exceed demand over the full year. Emergency stockpile releases have been authorized to stabilize markets. In practical terms, the world may still possess sufficient oil reserves, but the costs associated with transportation, insurance, and financial risk have risen sharply, transforming geopolitical tension into inflationary pressure. The military implications extend well beyond the immediate battlefield. Reports suggest that the United States has urged allied states to assist in securing maritime routes around the Strait of Hormuz while signaling the possibility of further strikes against Iranian infrastructure. Gulf states, including Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, have reportedly intercepted incoming drones and missiles as part of defensive responses. Data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute underscores the structural environment in which this war is unfolding. U.S. arms exports expanded significantly in recent years, and the United States remains the dominant supplier of Israel's imported weapons. The wider Middle East security landscape therefore reflects complex networks of defense trade, strategic alliances, and external patronage that shape the region's military balance. For ASEAN and Malaysia, the implications are immediate and tangible. ASEAN foreign ministers convened a special discussion on developments in the Middle East, while Malaysia has called publicly for an immediate ceasefire. Bank Negara Malaysia has warned that escalating geopolitical tensions present downside risks to economic stability and financial markets. Malaysia's shipping sector has also activated emergency response measures, reflecting rising war risk premiums associated with vessels operating in the Persian Gulf. In my assessment, based on verified developments, policymakers in Malaysia and across ASEAN must now treat the conflict as a multidimensional economic challenge involving energy security, logistics resilience, inflation management, and balanced diplomacy. Across the wider Muslim world, including Palestine, the conflict is viewed simultaneously through strategic and moral perspectives. The Palestinian issue continues to shape regional perceptions of legitimacy, while ongoing accusations of double standards in international responses deepen distrust toward the idea of a rules-based order. At the same time, Many Muslim-majority governments remain cautious about uncontrolled escalation that could endanger their own security or economic stability. The most responsible strategic approach, therefore, lies not in emotional escalation or selective legal interpretations, but in a disciplined commitment to de-escalation, civilian protection, humanitarian access, maritime security, and consistent application of international legal principles. Financial markets may adapt to volatility, but a stable international order cannot survive prolonged contradictions between declared rules and actual behavior. Thank you all for tuning in and supporting my podcast news channel. Your time, attention, and engagement truly mean a great deal. I sincerely appreciate your continued support and thoughtful viewership. Join, follow, like, and share.